For as long as anyone can remember, Canada's brightest hockey prodigies have all walked the same path. They light up the Canadian junior leagues, ride buses between prairie towns, chase the Memorial Cup, and then step into the NHL spotlight. It's tradition, almost a ritual, that has defined how superstars are made. But on a summer day in 2025, a 17-year-old phenom from the Yukon tore up that script and wrote a new one. In a live announcement on ESPN SportsCenter, Gavin McKenna, the most dynamic junior player in the nation, declared he was leaving major junior hockey to play U.S. college hockey at Penn State. This huge decision sent shockwaves through the hockey world. A Canadian junior superstar turning his back on the CHL for the NCAA? It was unthinkable just last year. Today, we'll explore Gavin McKenna's journey, from his record-shattering junior exploits to the choice that broke decades of tradition. How did this teen prodigy end up challenging the entire development system of hockey? And what ripple effects could his path have on the future of the sport? This is the story of Gavin McKenna's bold move, and how it might change hockey forever. To really understand how big Gavin McKenna's decision is, you first need to know who he is. McKenna comes from Whitehorse, Yukon, not exactly a hockey hotspot. But by his mid-teens, people were already calling him a future superstar. Some even compared him to Connor McDavid. Now, at just 17, he's the favorite to go first overall in the 2026 NHL draft. Scouts say he's in that rare category of talent that only shows up once every few years. His junior hockey resume was already pretty absurd. McKenna was the first overall pick in the 2022 WHL Bantam Draft, and he wasted no time living up to the hype. In his first full WHL season, 2023-24, as a 16-year-old rookie, he exploded for 97 points, finishing near the very top of the league scoring race and earning WHL Rookie of the Year honors. He wasn't just good for his age, he was one of the best players in the entire league, period. By 2024-25, his sophomore season, McKenna had jumped into true superstar status. He piled up 129 points, 41 goals, 88 assists in just 56 games, leading all WHL players in assists and plus-minus rating. That 129-point outburst made him the second highest scorer in the WHL, that is, and he was barely 17. The only players ahead of him in recent junior history at such a young age? John Tavares, Sidney Crosby, just to name a few. And McKenna joined their company by becoming one of the youngest ever to win the CHL Player of the Year award. In fact, McKenna's 2024-25 campaign was the stuff of legend. He recorded at least 1 point in 53 consecutive games spanning the regular season and playoffs, a modern CHL record. He went 40 straight games with a point to end the regular season, 100 points in that stretch alone, and kept the streak going 13 more games into the playoffs. Only 3 times all season was an opposing team able to hold him off the score sheet. By the end of the season, he had collected pretty much every piece of hardware available. The WHL's 4 Broncos trophy as Player of the Year, the CHL David Branch trophy as Canada's top junior player of the year, and a Memorial Cup finals appearance with his Medicine Hat Tigers. Not to mention a gold medal and scoring record for Team Canada at the Under-18 World Championships. In short, Gavin McKenna was junior hockey's biggest star, a can't-miss phenom tracking toward NHL superstardom. Hockey people often toss around the term generational talent, but with McKenna they really mean it. NHL Central Scouting Director Dan Marr claims that McKenna's offensive instincts and playmaking are truly exceptional, comparing his game to a young Patrick Kane or Doug Gilmour, smaller players who dominated with skill and smarts. His mind for the game operates on another level. Even his future college coach, Guy Gadowski at Penn State, couldn't help but compare McKenna's creativity to Wayne Gretzky's. Think about that. A college coach casually bringing up Gretzky when talking about an incoming freshman. Gadowski said, "His mind is just very different. None of us think like Gavin does." When a teenager is getting that kind of praise, you know he's not just another prospect. By late spring 2025, McKenna had cemented himself as the most exciting Canadian junior talent since Connor Bedard, who, coincidentally, is a cousin by marriage of McKenna's. The stage was set for him to follow the familiar footsteps of Bedard, Crosby, McDavid, and so many others, dominate the CHL, be drafted to the NHL, and likely jump straight into the big league at 18. That's what everyone expected. But Gavin McKenna had a different plan brewing. Beneath all the accolades and highlight reel plays, he was contemplating a path that no player of his caliber had been allowed to, or dared to take before. On July 10, 2025, McKenna sat in front of TV cameras on ESPN's SportsCenter and announced a choice that stunned fans and junior coaches. Instead of returning to the WHL for his draft year, he was committing to play NCAA Division I hockey at Penn State University. For decades, the idea of a Canadian CHL star, especially one of McKenna's stature, voluntarily leaving Major Junior to play college hockey was unheard of. Under old rules, it wasn't just rare, it was impossible. So how could McKenna even do this? It took a fundamental change in NCAA rules to make his decision possible. Up until recently, the NCAA forbade any player with Canadian major junior experience from playing college hockey, considering the CHL a professional league because players receive stipends and some sign NHL contracts while still in junior. If you did so much as played a single game in the CHL, you were ineligible for US college hockey. No exceptions, no second chances. In fact, one Ontario player even filed a lawsuit after he lost NCAA eligibility simply for appearing in 2 exhibition games as a 16-year-old for the Windsor Spitfires. That's how strict and unforgiving the old system was. One taste of Major Junior and the college door slammed shut. Everything started to shift in late 2024. Facing mounting pressure and that class action lawsuit, the NCAA Division I Council finally voted in November 2024 to lift its historic ban and allow players with CHL experience to compete in Division I hockey. The change, effective August 1, 2025, was nothing short of revolutionary for hockey development. For the first time in modern history, a player didn't have to choose one path or the other at 16. They could basically have a foot in both worlds. The NCAA would now treat CHL players as amateurs as long as they hadn't been paid more than actual and necessary expenses, the small stipends junior receive. In practical terms, this meant a Canadian kid could play in the CHL and later go to the NCAA, undoing a decades-old either-or decision. College Hockey Incorporated stated plainly, yes, players who compete in the CHL are now eligible for NCAA D1 hockey, beginning August 1, 2025. The floodgates weren't open just yet, but the lock had been broken. Gavin McKenna is the highest profile pioneer to walk through this new door. Others were testing it too. A handful of junior players had quietly committed to NCAA programs once the rule change was announced. For example, defenseman Jackson Smith, who played in the WHL with Tri-City, opted to join Penn State as well. He was even drafted 14th overall in the 2025 NHL draft by Columbus and still chose to head to college. A 20-year-old former CHLer, Braxton Whitehead, became the first to take advantage by committing to Arizona State for 2025. But those cases, while noteworthy, were not groundbreaking. McKenna's case is. He is by far the most accomplished junior player to ever attempt this leap, a generational talent defecting from the CHL pipeline. As Penn State's coach Guy Gadowski said, McKenna's mere presence in the NCAA is extremely significant not only to our program, but to college hockey as a whole. This is new ground for everyone. When McKenna announced his decision, it kind of caught Canadian junior hockey leaders off guard, and they scrambled to respond calmly. Imagine the tension on that day. One of the CHL's biggest stars announcing on national TV, and not even Canadian TV, but American ESPN, that he's leaving. Even the Ontario Hockey League's commissioner, when asked about McKenna's jump, chose his words carefully. He acknowledged it was an incredible time of change in player development, and that young players now have more control over their careers. Publicly, CHL officials, agents, and coaches tried to put a positive spin on it, calling the new flexibility great for young players and their families. Privately, you can bet there were some nervous conference calls in the CHL offices. This was their worst fear. A direct talent drain to U.S. colleges, involving the kind of superstar that could fill arenas for junior teams. McKenna himself described the decision as super tough, weighing tradition and the known path versus something new and challenging. Ultimately, he said, Penn State felt like the best spot for him after visiting campus with his dad. The appeal was clear. He would get to play against older, stronger competition in the NCAA, which he believed would make his jump to the NHL easier. Going against older, heavier, stronger guys, I think it really prepares you, McKenna explained, adding that just being around more mature teammates in a college environment could accelerate his growth. He emphasized that he was grateful for his time in the WHL, but saw college as a new challenge that would push him further. In one interview, McKenna admitted he even liked the fact that he would be the first to do this. I think he loves the fact that he would be the very first, Coach Gadowski noted. It takes a certain bold personality at 17 to embrace being a trailblazer. Thus, with a mix of excitement and controversy, Gavin McKenna charted a course that has no real precedent in modern hockey. But talent and new rules alone don't tell the whole story of why he made this jump. There's another big factor guiding the scales: cold, hard cash. It's impossible to talk about McKenna's NCAA decision without talking about money. In the new era of college sports, one acronym has changed the game: NIL, which stands for name, image, and likeness. NIL rules now allow college athletes to earn compensation through endorsements and sponsorships, effectively letting them make money while still in school. And top college programs have wasted no time leveraging NIL to recruit blue-chip talent. Hockey, long an amateur purist sport at the college level, just entered the NIL arms race, and Gavin McKenna might be its first big money free agent. How much money are we talking? According to insider reports, Penn State's offer to McKenna was in the neighborhood of $700,000. Let that sink in. $700,000. Likely for just his freshman year in college. That's outrageous for an amateur hockey player, and it's only about $75,000 shy of an NHL league minimum salary. In other words, at 17 years old, McKenna is getting full compensation almost equal to what a fourth-line NHL rookie makes. The NIL era has truly arrived in hockey. Penn State wasn't the only school in the bidding either. Reports say Michigan State University also desperately wanted McKenna and dangled around $300,000 in NIL deals to bait him in. Penn State's collective, the network of boosters and sponsors, simply blew that out of the water with the $700K package. For context, these deals can include everything from endorsement contracts with local businesses, car dealerships, apparel sponsorships, to social media marketing agreements. Essentially, boosters can now legally offer financial incentives via NIL to recruits. What we're witnessing is something like a free agency bidding war, but for a 17-year-old amateur. College hockey has never seen this before. For McKenna and his family, the NIL money had to be a significant factor. In the CHL, players receive only a low-key stipend, about $600 a month during the season, which is not even considered income. They do get scholarship funds for post-secondary education, but they cannot earn money from endorsements without losing amateur status. And until now, there was nowhere to use that status anyway. By choosing the NCAA, McKenna positioned himself to potentially earn a high six-figure income before he even plays an NHL game. If he had stayed in the WHL, his earnings would have been basically gas money and meal per diem. The trade-off traditionally made in exchange for major juniors' exposure and competition. But now college hockey can offer both strong competition and immediate financial rewards. As one analyst put it, McKenna's rumored deal makes him one of the highest paid hockey players in North America who isn't even a pro yet. It's a massive shift. The magnitude of these offers even has some NCAA coaches and officials in shock. At the NCAA's Frozen Four in 2025, as news of the rule change spread, coaches openly speculated about bidding wars emerging for top CHL players, rumors of a lot of numbers being thrown around. Who knows what's fact or not, said Minnesota Duluth coach Scott Sandelin, acknowledging that this is now part of the recruiting process. In McKenna's case, it wasn't a rumor. The numbers were very real. We can safely say that NIL money greased the skids for this historic move. Yet, McKenna's choice wasn't purely about money. It was about seeing a different development benefit from the NCAA. The cash made it easier to leave the WHL, but the competitive appeal was key too. McKenna noted that playing in the NCAA's Big Ten Conference against older 21 to 24-year-old players will push him out of his comfort zone and prepare him for the next level. He watched 18-year-old phenoms like Cale Makar and Owen Power thrive in college and come out NHL ready, and Penn State offered him something unique: the chance to be the guy who puts their program on the map. Penn State's hockey program, nicknamed Hockey Valley, is relatively new and had never landed a recruit of McKenna's caliber. In fact, some are calling McKenna arguably the biggest commit in any sport in Penn State's recent history. Bigger than top football signees, bigger than blue-chip basketball recruits, the school rolled out the red carpet for his visit, tapping into its Big Ten sports machine to show him a future few junior teams can rival. World-class training facilities, nationally televised games, and yes, 6,000 plus buzzing students in the Roar Zone at Pecula ice arena. The NIL factor also shows a deeper change. Hockey's talent development is becoming a business. Much like we've seen for years in college basketball and football, top teenage hockey players are now going to be wooed not only with promises of ice time and NHL development, but with endorsement dollars and marketing opportunities. McKenna's $700,000 deal could set a benchmark. If he succeeds at Penn State and goes number 1 in the draft as expected, it will signal to every elite prospect and their parents that the NCAA route can pay off literally and figuratively. That leads us to the big picture. Why is this decision such a break from tradition, and what could it mean going forward? Gavin McKenna's defection to the NCAA is a direct challenge to a hockey institution. The Canadian Hockey League, CHL, made up of the WHL, OHL, and QMJHL, has reigned for decades as the premier training ground for NHL talent, especially for Canadian-born players. The numbers speak to that dominance. In any given year, roughly 2/3 of the top North American prospects ranked by NHL Central Scouting comes from the CHL ranks. The CHL's Memorial Cup is seen as the toughest trophy to win in junior hockey, and Canadian kids grow up dreaming of hoisting it just as much as the Stanley Cup. So for a player like McKenna, who was on track to potentially win a Memorial Cup and was already a star in that world, to voluntarily exit stage left, it's a break in the natural order of things. Why has the CHL been the default path? Part of it is cultural and historical. For generations, if you were an elite Canadian teenager, you basically had two choices: play major junior at 16, or go a much less certain route through junior A, tier 2 leagues, and hope for a US college scholarship. Most chose the first option, aiming to be drafted at 18 and go pro quickly. The CHL offers a pro-style schedule, 68+ games, lots of travel, big arenas, and competition against other top 16 to 20-year-olds, many of who will be NHL draft picks. It has the aura of the fastest track to the NHL. Players like Sidney Crosby, Connor McDavid, Nathan MacKinnon, and Connor Bedard all starred in the CHL, and were in the NHL by age 18. NCAA hockey, on the other hand, was often seen as the road less traveled for Canadians, pursued typically by those who valued education or by late bloomers who didn't land in the CHL at 16. College hockey, with its shorter season, around 34 games, and older average age, was sometimes stereotyped as a slower, more defensive game. Good for development, yes, but not the obvious choice for a can't-miss 18-year-old. However, that perception has been changing. In recent years, a rising tide of NCAA alumni have made their mark in the NHL, shaking up the old biases. By 2023, about 1/3 of NHL players had played college hockey, a proportion that has steadily grown from the 20% or lower of the 1990s. And it's not just quantity, it's quality. Some of the NHL's biggest young stars took the NCAA route. Cale Makar, Stanley Cup winner and Norris Trophy defenseman via UMass Amherst. Jack Eichel, Hobey Baker winner at BU, now an NHL superstar. Adam Fantilli, University of Michigan product and top 2023 draftee, and even Canadian phenoms like Owen Power, who went number 1 overall in 2021 after a year at Michigan, and Macklin Celebrini, a Canadian who dominated at Boston University and was drafted first overall in 2025. These examples have punched holes in the idea that NCAA is a secondary route. If anything, the NCAA has proven it can produce NHL-ready talent that sometimes outshines their CHL counterparts. For years, it was an unspoken rule in Canadian hockey. If you were already playing in the CHL, you didn't go to college. The NCAA was seen as a slower path, the scenic route, compared to the CHL's shortcut to the NHL. College players often turned pro at 22, while CHL players were debuting in the league at 18 or 19. The trade-off? CHL players might get there faster, but sometimes without the same physical or mental maturity, leading to burnout or stalled development. By leaving the WHL for the NCAA, Gavin McKenna is rejecting that old logic. He's betting that taking the longer road won't hurt his career. It might even make it better. It's a bold move, one that challenges decades of hockey tradition in Canada. In a way, it's similar to what Börje Salming did in the 1970s, proving that European players could thrive in the NHL. Now, McKenna could prove that college hockey is just as valid a path for elite Canadian prospects. Even CHL leadership is starting to acknowledge the change. OHL Commissioner Brian Crawford admitted that while most young players might struggle in the NCAA due to the older competition, someone like McKenna is talented enough to succeed anywhere. He even hinted that some CHL players might use college as the next step in their development, something that would have been unheard of just a few years ago. McKenna's choice has lit a fuse of questions and speculation. Is this an isolated case or the start of a trend? Could we see a wave of elite prospects decommit from the CHL pipeline and flock to NCAA programs, chasing those NIL deals and college competition? The phrase "opens the floodgates" has been tossed around a lot, and it isn't an exaggeration. Hockey East Commissioner Steve Metcalf told reporters in April 2025 that he envisions the NCAA becoming North America's top producer of NHL draft-ready talent in the near future. In his view, the hierarchy could flip. The CHL and USHL develop 16-17-year-olds, then feed them into college hockey, which then feeds the NHL. This would indeed be a huge realignment of the development system, basically slotting the NCAA above the CHL as the final stepping stone for top players. Is there evidence it's happening? Early signs point to yes. By mid-2025, numerous CHL players had already committed to NCAA schools for the 2025-26 season, taking advantage of the new rule. Penn State, in particular, seemed to be assembling a blockbuster freshman class. Aside from McKenna and Jackson Smith, rumors swirled that Penn State was in talks with even more blue chippers, including Michael Misa, the OHL phenom who had just been drafted second overall in the 2025 NHL draft, and Porter Martone, drafted 6th overall. Misa is an interesting case. He was another exceptional talent in the CHL, granted exceptional status to play at 15, just like Bedard was. And under the old rules, he'd have no reason to ever consider college. But now, his brother already plays at Penn State, and with McKenna heading there, the speculation of Misa bolting from the OHL to join them took on a life of its own. If Penn State were to somehow land Misa as well, it would be an exclamation point. The top 2 picks of the NHL draft, McKenna projected number 1 in 2026, Misa picked number 2 in 2025, both wearing Nittany Lion blue instead of junior jerseys. Other programs are also in the mix. Arizona State picked up Braxton Whitehead, a former WHL player, as mentioned. There's talk of schools like Minnesota, Michigan, Boston College, and others eyeing Canadian junior standouts now that they're fair game. Essentially, NCAA coaches are scouring CHL rosters for any player who might want a change or a bigger spotlight. Just as, for years, CHL teams used to poach players committed to college. The recruiting battle has truly become two-way. Gavin McKenna's decision to leave the WHL for college hockey is shaking up the entire development system. In the US, some hockey officials are worried. If more top Canadian players start heading to NCAA teams, that could mean fewer spots for American kids. There were even talks of putting a cap on how many non-Americans can be on a college hockey team, but that idea was quickly shut down. NCAA leadership made it clear. They want the best talent, no matter where it's from. It might make things hard for US junior leagues, but it's great for the quality of college hockey. The CHL, on the other hand, may have to adjust fast. Since they can't offer real money without breaking amateur rules, they'll likely lean harder on education perks, better living setups, and maybe increasing stipends. Some are even suggesting the CHL could raise the number of international players allowed per team. If Canadian stars start heading to US colleges, the CHL might replace them with more young players from Sweden, Finland, or Czechia. In short, we could see a talent trade. Canadians to the NCAA, Europeans to the CHL. Eventually, the two systems, CHL and NCAA, might stop competing and start working together. Imagine NHL drafted players being allowed to go play college hockey even after time in the CHL, like how it works in baseball. What's clear is this: players now have more power. They have real options and can use that as leverage. CHL teams might try harder to keep top players, and NCAA schools could start using NIL deals to win recruiting battles. It's already feeling like the Wild West. NHL teams are also watching closely. With players like McKenna choosing college, scouts may shift more attention to NCAA freshmen. Teams that used to only draft from the CHL might now push some of their own prospects towards college hockey, especially if they need time to grow physically. From a fan perspective, everything's getting mixed up. The Memorial Cup might miss a star because he's in the Frozen Four instead. Canadians might start watching NCAA highlights because their favorite prospect is now tearing it up in a Michigan or Penn State jersey. That crossover has never really happened before. And one last twist. For years, some American players left college to play in the CHL. Now, with NCAA on the rise and CHL imports dropping, that trend may disappear. The result? Americans stick with USHL/NCAA. Canadians truly split between CHL and college, and Europeans now weighing both paths too. Bottom line, McKenna's choice is a game changer. If he thrives, more top players will follow. If he struggles, critics will say he should have stayed in junior. Either way, the hockey world is watching. One of the biggest questions in hockey right now is this: which path is better for NHL development, the CHL or NCAA? For years, the answer was, it depends. But now, thanks to Gavin McKenna choosing both, we might finally start to see which one actually works better. Here's the difference. CHL players get drafted at 18, but can't play in the AHL until they're 20 unless they make the NHL. So if they're not ready, they're stuck in junior. NCAA players, meanwhile, tend to go pro later, but they use that time to grow stronger, smarter, and more physically mature. For a top-tier talent like McKenna, college might be the best of both worlds. He could play 1 year at Penn State against older, tougher competition, then jump straight to the NHL, more prepared and more durable. He's not slowing down his career. If anything, he's setting himself up for a smoother start. NHL scouts are paying attention. Over 33% of current NHL players came through college hockey. And that's despite the NCAA being a much smaller system than the CHL. That success rate speaks volumes. In fact, for American players who skip college and jump to the CHL, only 17% end up making the NHL. So the shortcut isn't always better. The styles are different too. CHL teams play a 68-game season, giving lots of in-game experience. NCAA teams play around 30 to 40 games, but focus more on practice, systems, and strength training. That slower pace can actually help players develop smarter hockey habits. NCAA defenders tend to be older, stronger, and more disciplined, closer to what you'd see in the NHL. That's perfect for someone like McKenna who wants to fine-tune his offensive game. Want proof that the slower path works? Look at Devin Levi. He didn't go the usual route. He was drafted by Florida while playing in a Canadian Junior League, CCHL, then played college hockey at Northeastern. That's not a traditional path at all, but he absolutely crushed it, twice winning the Mike Richter Award for Best College Goalie and now playing for the Buffalo Sabres. The NHL is starting to notice. As we said, recent top picks like Owen Power, Adam Fantilli, and Macklin Celebrini all came from college hockey. If McKenna goes first overall after 1 year at Penn State, that could fully shift the spotlight. Standing here in 2025, we are at the dawn of a new era in hockey development. In the narrative of hockey history, his decision to blaze an uncharted trail might be remembered alongside other huge moments. Bore Salming paving the way for Europeans in the NHL, the 1980 Miracle on Ice, Americans showing US college hockey kids can compete with the world's best, or the integration of Russian players in the 1990s, breaking Cold War barriers. McKenna's move may not have the same gravity as those, but in the hockey development ecosystem, it's game-changing. Imagine a few years from now, McKenna is starring in the NHL, and a new crop of 15-year-old prodigies in Canada are weighing their options. They've seen this path succeed. They know they can play a year or two in the WHL or OHL to get their feet wet, and if the situation is right, maybe their junior team is struggling or they want a bigger stage. They can jump to a top college program and thrive, all while pocketing a fat NIL check and getting a taste of college life. The decision is no longer solely about hockey. It's about life experience and financial opportunity too. Some will still choose the traditional route. The CHL isn't going anywhere, and it will still produce the majority of NHL draft picks for now. But players will feel empowered to choose what fits them best. As Alan Walsh said, they can make decisions based on what's best for them, not what's best for the CHL or NCAA. For the hockey fan, this could be an exciting change. We'll get to see our favorite prospects in different settings. Maybe the Memorial Cup and the NCAA Frozen Four will both become must-watch events to follow the next generation. They already are for diehards, but maybe even more so now. We might imagine some kind of champion showdown one day, but let's not get ahead of ourselves. In the immediate future, all eyes will be on Happy Valley, Pennsylvania, where Gavin McKenna will don the Nittany Lions jersey and step onto the college ice as arguably the most hyped freshman in NCAA hockey history. The spotlight will be intense. Every game will be dissected by both NHL scouts and junior hockey experts. Will he dominate older competition as he did juniors? How will he handle the fewer games but higher intensity? Penn State's coach Guy Gadowski is certainly pumped for what McKenna brings, noting that it's huge not just for Penn State, but for college hockey overall. The Penn State community, relatively new to big-time hockey success, will suddenly find itself at the center of the hockey universe for a while. Expect SportsCenter highlights, sold-out arenas, maybe even new TV deals for college hockey if this trend grows. And north of the border, expect the CHL to double down on promoting their own product. They'll want to remind the world that they are still the training ground of Connor Bedard, Sidney Crosby, Mario Lemieux, and so on. They'll likely celebrate those who stay, possibly with improved support. The CHL awards might one day include a tongue-in-cheek, please don't go award. Kidding. Mostly. In all seriousness, Gavin McKenna's journey is a turning point. The title of this story is How McKenna's Move Could Change Hockey Forever. The truth is, the change has already begun. The moment the NCAA opened its door, the old order was gone. McKenna simply happened to be a trailblazer carrying the torch through that door, lighting the way for others. If Bore Salming's legacy was showing that Europeans belong in the NHL, McKenna's legacy might be that paths in hockey are not set in stone, that a great player can come from anywhere, even if it means mixing and matching development routes in a way that once broke the rules. Years from now, we might tell young kids this story as inspiration. The tale of a 17-year-old kid from the Yukon who dared to go against tradition, who bet on himself in a new system, and in doing so, changed the game. Gavin McKenna hasn't played a single college game yet, let alone an NHL game, but his impact is already being felt across leagues and front offices. The hockey world is watching closely, because the echoes of his choice will be felt in junior rinks, college arenas, and NHL draft floors for years to come. One teenager's bold decision, fueled by talent, a new rule, and perhaps a $700,000 nudge, has set in motion a domino effect of possibilities. Hockey may never be the same, and as fans, we might just look back on this moment and say, that was the point when everything started to change. Thanks for watching. If you want to hear how one of the NHL's most overlooked draft picks became one of the smartest and most skilled players the league has ever seen, check out our video on Pavel Datsyuk, how an NHL star nobody wanted destroyed everyone. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and drop your favorite Gavin McKenna moment in the comments. See you in the next one.